Hi there, and welcome to In the Studio today with Matt, Tommy, and Pattie Ann Hale. We're having some conversations today about cultivating a successful creative life. Hey, it's Advent. It's the time where we're preparing for Christmas, and boy, it's a great time, isn't it? It's a fun time. We've been having a lot of fun at our house, putting up all our Christmas decorations and doing all the things that it takes to get ready for Christmas. Every year, I don't know why I do this. I'm like, honey, I have to put up handmade garlands. So I have to go to Home Depot and get all the clippings and all that kind of stuff and make my own garland. And I love that, but at the same time, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of work. I think that's one of our traditions that we do. I just love it. It's something about the wintertime and the fall that I'd love to get crafty like that and make beautiful decorations. And we're going to be talking about a lot of that today, about some of the traditions that really make Christmas and this Advent season special. So how are you today?
I'm great.
Good. Feeling that Christmas spirit?
I am. And you know, what I love about Christmas the most is just being with people that you love. I know that sounds cheesy or kind of naive, but it's true. It's really what makes the difference. And so just want to introduce, we have in the studio with us our assistant with the worship studio, Claire Brooks, and her grandmother.
Miss Jean Chitty.
Jean Chitty is with us, and so they're going to be talking some about their traditions.
Yeah.
And I just think, you know, with talking about the connection with the arts and Christmas, you know, I think there's such a history, such a heritage of the arts celebrating Jesus.
That's right.
You know, and the church has supported that all the way through history. There has been so many beautiful artworks and sculptures that have come out of that connection with creativity, celebrating Christmas. And so, you know,
it's interesting. Just the other day, I was talking to somebody about our whole history in the Protestant Reformation and how when we started to really embrace the Word of God in the Protestant Reformation, a lot of times we left the beauty behind, and so a lot of the ceremony, a lot of the tradition, a lot of the beautiful things we kind of left on the back burner. And come forward today, you know, now for myself, you know, growing up in the Methodist Church, but now being involved in more non-denominational charismatic churches, we really miss a lot of the beautiful history and tradition that we do have. And I know one of the things we're doing at our church this year is, you know, doing the Advent wreath of every Sunday, you know, doing readings and having the children come up and light the candles. And I know for some people, they're like, why are you doing that? What does that even mean? And for others, it's a really important connection to what's going on. So,
yeah, I think, you know, in thinking about how to celebrate Christmas, I always try to think of something every year that I can add that's just a little creative element that can become part of our heritage with our family.
Yeah.
You know, I've studied art for many years, and I love the pomp of the beauty that comes out of the Catholic Church and the artists that worked with the Catholic Church,
Sure.
especially during the Renaissance and that kind of thing. But, you know, I can remember, I think one of my favorite memories is when I was a kid, my mom put this huge plastic, it sounds so cheesy, but it's like this huge plastic picture of Santa Claus on the door. You know, it covers the whole outer door. And I can remember I was probably 5, and I just loved the illustration of that. And it sounds so silly, but I can remember that being such a part of what I thought of with Christmas. Every year we had to decorate the door.
Isn't that funny?
A huge piece of glittery red fabric or glittery red paper on the door, or a big picture of Santa Claus or something like that. And so, you know, all through my growing up, you know, we always did lots of creative things. Coming from the Appalachian Mountains, you know, we did cookies and decorating cookies and making handmade ornaments all the time. And I can remember different seasons. My mom was one of those creative people that would always be doing something different every year.
Yeah.
So one year it would be macrame ornaments. The next year it would be these delicate little crocheted ornaments. The next year it would be salt dough. And so we would always have these handmade things that we would get involved with according to what she was doing.
That's awesome. Well, you know, one of the connections that I have, you know, since moving to Asheville, Claire and I have been friends now for several years, and ever since I've known you, you talked a lot about your Moravian connection and just the history that your family has there. And I know for a lot of people, it seems like, you know, Christmas can have good memories, bad memories, not a lot of tradition and everything, but you guys have really, I think, as a family, and you now being 30 something, I won't tell your age on the radio like I did Pattie's last time, but you guys have really kept that connection, and your grandma's here today. I'm just so glad that y'all are here. So how special is that connection for you, I mean, and your kids now?
It's very special, and I think what you were saying, just the tradition of carrying something on and how it's lacking a little bit in maybe the charismatic church and non-denominations, and that makes me cling to it even more.
Yeah.
I think of wanting these real traditional aspects that have been carried on for generation to generation. And I grew up with them, and even though we weren't in a Moravian church here in Asheville, so much of my Christmas is very much related to Moravian traditions because of my grandparents. So.
Well, Miss Jean, we're glad you're here with us today, and you're the matriarch of this family, and really probably one that has helped keep a lot of these traditions alive. I know that when some people are listening today and say Moravian, what is a Moravian, and what does that even mean? Can you kind of give us a little background of what that means for y'all as a family, and where all that comes from?
The Moravian Church is a very old denomination. It's pre-Reformation.
Wow.
And it had its origin in what is Czech Republic today, in Bohemia and Moravia. And they flourished for many years. They were followers of John Huss, who was a reformer in the church, who was burned at the stake in 1415.
Wow.
And the Moravian Church was incorporated in 1457. So that's how old we are.
Wow.
And
well, you look great.
Thank you. I've aged well.
That's right.
They flourished in Bohemia and Moravia for a number of years. And then, of course, Europe got into the wars of who's going to reign and borders, and they became religious refugees in the early 18th century. And they were given asylum by a German count in Saxony in Germany. And so as they came across the border from Moravia into Germany, they were called Moravians.
Wow.
And so that's where the church, the modern church, got its name. And so they came to Germany, and they decided they would move on.
Wow.
So they came to this country in the early 18th century. They settled first in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. That was their main settlement in Pennsylvania. And then from there, a group came to North Carolina, into Forsyth, what is Forsyth County today.
Wow. That's in middle North Carolina? Where is that in North Carolina?
That's where Winston-Salem is, in the Piedmont. You're right. And that's where they named their community Salem, their main community there, Salem, and that's where Winston-Salem gets its name.
Wow. I just did some genealogy for my own family, trying to find the Tommy name. My mom got on Ancestry.com, so I'm kind of addicted to that right now. But we found out that some of the people that came over ended up, I think it was Pennsylvania Dutch, and the huge craftsman tradition that's there. I was like, wow, so who knows? I might have some Moravian in me. See, Claire, we could be cousins. You never know. So.
If
you're lucky.
That's right, if you're lucky. That's right.
Well, of course, the Europeans who came to this country brought their traditions with them, and the Moravians brought their traditions from Germany when they came, and they brought the Christmas tree, and they also brought the use of the nativity scene under the Christmas tree. Now, the nativity scene is not uniquely Moravian. That's been around since the Renaissance.
Yes.
But the Moravians use it in a very distinct way. We make a large Christmas nativity scene under or near the Christmas tree.
Wow.
And we call it a putz, a P-U-T-Z, which is just a funny little German word, archaic German word, that means decorate.
Now, when I had first heard Claire talk about that and putting up a putz, I thought, well, what's the big deal about that? Because I remember as a kid, and we've got now on our, table out there a small little nativity scene, and Claire's like, oh, no. This is not what, your grandma's nativity scene, or where there are little ceramic things or whatever. This is a whole different deal. So how long has that tradition been going on for Moravians?
Well, in the records here in North Carolina, and of course I'm sure it was earlier than this in Pennsylvania, the earliest record is 1760 in Bethabara, which was where the Moravians came first when they came south. And that was during the French and Indian War, and there were a lot of refugees that came to that settlement for protection. And so at Christmas, the Moravians got out their nativity and they made their puts and they explained the Christmas story. That's the educational tool that they used to explain the Christmas story.
It's always interesting to me, I think, because artists have always been such a huge part of the church, especially, you know, like you said, pre-Reformation, is when people couldn't read and when there was not a lot of written documentation of church traditions. It was always the artists, it was always the creative people that have been employed to come together and say, hey, let's give a visual representation or an interactive representation of what it means to be Christian or what it means to be Moravian or what it means to be involved now in the Christmas story. So that's encouraging. I mean, just right here in North Carolina and all over the world, we have that tradition here. So that's wonderful.
And they used it as an educational tool for the children and then for anyone. And Claire's making a putsch this year that the tradition has come down through our family. My husband and I always made a very large putsch under our Christmas tree. And of course, when lights came in, the Moravians started lighting their puts. So each scene is lighted, and maybe one child will tell the story, and one child will operate the lights, as Claire's mother did when she was a little girl. And so as the story's told, each scene is lighted.
Wow. That's just so incredible. I know your kids, because I know your kids. I mean, I'm sure they're loving that whole process of, was it Koa the other day that was on the phone? He was like, I'm doing the lighting. Yeah. You know, that's so awesome just to give them something to do. So that's really neat. So tell us about, as you grew up, I mean, you've been seeing, you know, your grandma's puts and this whole thing under their tree. How does that affect you? I mean, what made you want to do this year and just that whole connection, I guess?
Well, I've always wanted to do one, but I haven't collected my scenery yet. It's quite a process of, through the years, collecting your scenery and also building a lighting system, which is quite the process. So this year, my mom offered to let me use hers to get me started.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm able to do it this year. And
cool.
Then, and growing up with Uma and Oompa, my grandparents, they always had the white ceramic, which is beautiful. And to me, that is so traditional.
Yeah.
And my mom's is painted, mostly Fontanini pieces. And so I still don't know which one I want to go with when I start.
Well, why don't you we'll get into yours maybe here just after the next break. We'll talk a little bit more about what a putsch actually is and what are some of the details with that. And remember, you're listening to In the Studio today, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
WGNW 95.7, The Choice.
Hi, I'm Matt Tommy from the Worship Studio. And if you're an artist, musician, craftsman, or just wanting to grow in your creativity, I'd like to invite you to be a part of the Unlocking the Heart of the Artist weekend experience coming up March 15th through 17th, 2013 in beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina. This weekend is specifically designed to help creative people just like you embrace their unique God-given design, overcome roadblocks to their creativity, pursue personal wholeness, and share the whole journey with artists from around the country. So for more information or to register online, please visit theworshipstudio.org/unlocking, and we'll see you in March for Unlocking the Heart of the Artist.
Programming at 95.7 The Choice is made possible with the generous support of business partners like Area 22 Guitars. Area 22 Guitars is Western North Carolina's only boutique guitar shop. Whether it's an American-made all-tube hand-wired amp like Matchless, Divided by 13, Carr, or Fargen, or a U.S.-built custom luthier electric guitar brand like Anderson, PWE, Zion, Rowan, or Gatto, Area 22 Guitars specializes in the unique needs of the discerning musician. They carry a full line of boutique effect pedals like Keenly, Exotic, Rockbox, Menatone, and Wampler. And their acoustic guitars include Breedlove, Larrivee, Eastman, Bedell, and Crafter. Area 22 Guitars, not your average guitar shop. For more information, go to area22guitars.com or call them at 828-884-2222. That's 828-884-2222.
welcome back to In the Studio with Matt, Tommy, and Pattie Ann Hale. You're listening to us today on 95.7 The Choice here in Asheville, North Carolina. You can always listen to us live every Monday from 12 to 1 here at 95.7 FM, or you can also get us on 95.7, 95.7, I'm going to get it, 957thechoice.com, or where all the cool kids are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Worship Studio Inc. We are really glad today to be talking about Christmas stuff, and I should have worn my Christmas sweater or something, but I don't have one. I'm so glad. But that's right, a Bohemian scarf, since we're talking about Bohemian. But we're talking today about Advent and Christmas and all the wonderful traditions, and our friends here, Gene Chitty and also Claire Brooks, who works with us here at the Worship Studio, talking about some of the Moravian traditions and the tradition of the puts and for Christmas. So we're back with that. I was so, just as we were, in the break and talking about John Huss and some of the Moravian traditions, he had such a tradition and such a history of trying to make the faith accessible to people. Right. Tell that what you're talking about with him writing on the walls and of the church. I thought that was great.
I've had friends who have been to Bethlehem Chapel in Prague. I've never been, unfortunately. And you can still see where he wrote the words to hymns on the walls in that chapel where he preached, which was just unheard of in that day in the early 1400s, because the congregation didn't sing. The choir sang, or the priest sang. And so one of his reforms was to introduce congregational singing.
Wow. Again, just another way to bring the gospel into a way that people can interact with it in their culture. And I think for us as creatives today, that really is a part of our heart today is to make the gospel, to make the kingdom accessible where people can interact with it, whether they be a Christian yet or not, whether they be involved in a church yet or not. It was the heart of Jesus to take the gospel into the streets. And you look at, Huss and John Wesley and these other guys that said, you know what, I'm a part of the church, but I want to do whatever it takes to get the gospel into the streets where people can interact with it. So
along that same spirit that John Huss had of bringing the gospel to people in real ways, and letting them interact with it. It reminds me of Francis of Assisi, who in 1223 was kind of disturbed that people were coming into the church. They would come in for the Christmas service to the Mass in the Catholic Church. And there was, of course, the beautiful pictures, as almost all the Catholic churches are, beautiful pictures of the story of the gospel. And that was a good point of relationship for people to connect with Christ. But he wanted to go a step further for Christmas, and he created the first live nativity scene. And he actually used a cave and a wax figure of the baby Jesus, and there was costumed figures that was playing as Mary and Joseph, animals that his friends loaned to him for this live nativity scene, real shepherds in the field, that were already there. And what it did was, many people have written about him in his biography, and have written that it opened up a new poetic awakening for people to connect with the gospel. And
isn't it great that we always think we're the ones that had the great new idea, and then you read, 400 years ago or 600 years ago, they were doing this and doing it well,
Yeah, so he really had a heart to also connect with people in a real way and show them what it was. It was said in his biography that he wanted to give them the same experience that they would have holding their own children, and to realize this precious baby that was given to the earth. And so it worked, because they're still writing about him, and so and we're still doing live nativity scenes all over.
Right.
So,
That's right.
So Claire, getting back to what you're doing this year with your first puts, and so tell us about that. Tell us what that's been for you with your children and setting that up, and maybe some of the fun times you've had and some of the difficult stuff, like when the lights don't work.
That's right. Well, it starts with picking your spot, and we chose our barn. Our puts is about a 10 by 10 area, and it's 2 different levels. So you build your, it needs to be eye level sitting down. So you build your tabletops out of boxes and storage boxes and whatever we can pull together to make that, and you lay it tarp all over it, because next you're going to go out and start gathering moss and driftwood And so that was a lot of fun. Koa, my son, who's 7, loved that part of it. So we went tromping in the woods for a couple of days and got bags full of moss and driftwood and rocks. And so that was really fun. And so before you lay that down, you have to lay out your scenes and your lighting. There are 18 lights.
Wow.
And that's quite the challenge. My mom came over and helped me with that since I'd never laid one out myself. And so you set your scenes up, and then you put all your lighting out, and they're just little domed lighting system attached to 2 switchboards. So it's a mess until you start covering it up. So then we start covering it with moss and building our scenes. And something that I love about my mom's, that it's not just the white, is there's a lot of character in your pieces. The wise men, there's a tint that lights up, and it's real fabric.
Oh, wow.
And
so when you say scenes, we're not just talking, like a lot of people may have a nativity scene, we call it, on our table or whatever, but it's just like the manger.
The manger, right.
Everybody's right there together. So that's not what you're saying.
Yeah, this is, there's probably only 14 scenes.
What do you start
Do you remember?
with? Do you remember?
You start with Mary being met with the angel, being told that she's gonna have Jesus, that she's with child, and then there's the shepherds in the field, the angels. Then there's a multitude of angels. Then you have Bethlehem.
So there's a scene for every one of these.
There's a scene for every single one of these.
Separate figures for
There's
each
separate figures
scene.
for every
Wow.
one. So
That's
you have
complex.
yeah. So, and then you have Jerusalem, and you have Simeon at the very end, and you have, there's a lot of, now I'm
This
like,
is your puts test right here.
My
So
puts test,
on the
I know
radio,
how-
live, right here.
so, go ahead. What were you saying?
Everybody's puts is different.
Different, that's
Okay.
correct.
And that's what's so fascinating about it. And old Moravians had a tradition called putzing.
Huh.
So from Christmas to New Year's, they would visit each other's homes to view their puts and to hear the Christmas story again,
Interesting.
And my husband and I have enjoyed over the years seeing our friends' puts because they're always different from ours,
Yeah,
know. Some will be ethereal with angel hair and the clouds and the whole bit,
Yes.
And ours is very down to earth, and with sand for the wise men coming. And so every scene has its own unique personality, and it's a lot of fun to do. It takes a long time to do it.
Is it the tradition of the family is also to make the pieces? So you're saying some are porcelain, some are. Do you actually make the pieces, or do you buy those, or how does that work?
We don't make any of our own pieces. We just decorate and buy everything and add to through the years. And so I don't know. Did Mamaw ever make any ceramic pieces? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No.
The only figure my husband ever made was a pregnant Mary.
Huh.
Because you can't find them.
it. You can now, but
Wow.
we
You
couldn't
used to
years
not be
ago.
able to find her.
And you couldn't find the wise men on camels. So a friend called him. We lived in a little town about 30 miles from Winston-Salem. A friend called one Christmas years and years ago and said, I saw wise men on camels in a hardware store. So George goes to this hardware store, and he paid 15 cents for little plastic wise men on camels. But now we have beautiful wise men on camels.
So you're kind of looking for things
Yeah,
to go in your
all
puts
year.
all year.
Yeah, all
So you've
year.
always got
Yeah.
Christmas on your
Absolutely.
mind. That's awesome.
And to show how broad and different they are, when I would visit my grandparents in Winston-Salem and go putzing with them, one of my favorites as a kid was a man whose puts was a train set, an electric train set, and it was huge. But within his train set in the scenery were hundreds of nativity sets.
Wow.
And the fun was to count how many you could find, and they were as small as being inside of a nutshell.
Oh my gosh.
And so you would just sit there and find, and some of them were bigger.
Wow.
And so, but that was not a traditional puts, but that's what that visiting and opening your home out and still building something for people to see.
Right.
That particular friend of ours had done a lot of mission work all over the world. And he everywhere he went, he would buy a nativity set.
Wow, wow.
So it was fascinating to see. And he was an electrician engineer, so he had fancy wiring.
I'd like to have some of that.
That's right. That's right.
The Moravians have a rich history in missionary work, don't they?
Right.
They even were missionaries to the Cherokee Indian in
correct.
North Carolina.
Yeah.
I know I found that out a few years ago when I was studying the Moravian story, and we were actually moving to Wilkesboro. And so several years ago, and I was very interested in the Moravians because of some religious connections I was making. And so I found out that my grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee, believe it or not, with my pale skin. But she was a full-blooded Cherokee, and her name was Mahaley, and she was from Wilkesboro. And I had just found out that the Moravians, who I was feeling a lot of connection with spiritually, had ministered to the Cherokee Indians. So it was very likely that the Moravians had ministered to my great-great-grandmother.
That's great.
And so I'm
You're
very
a cousin,
interested.
too.
I'm a cousin, too.
Oh, Lord.
Actually,
So
the
this is
Moravians
so
went on
interesting.
the Trail of Tears. Moravian missionaries went with the Cherokees.
They walked with them.
They walked all the way to Oklahoma, and then established a mission in Oklahoma.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that
awesome.
little group of Germans who came over here were extremely mission-minded, and they went. That was a congregation of about 300 originally in Germany, and they sent missionaries literally around the world. They did the first Protestant mission work.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was from the community that Count Zinzendorf
Yeah,
had
that's
in
right.
Germany.
That's correct.
And they
Uh,
came directly to North Carolina. Yeah, that's awesome. And they were very prayerful people. Didn't they have a 100-year prayer watch?
100-year prayer watch.
Yeah,
That's right.
So
Wow.
what you guys are doing is like so carrying on. I mean, even the mission of reaching out to people and telling them the gospel in real ways, and walking with people. You know how you say they walk with them on the Trail of Tears. I think, you're opening up your home. That's incredible to me that you're just opening that up for like 2 weeks and putting the stress. I mean, that would be so stressful for me to open up like that every evening for people to come and see the puts and for you to tell the story, the Christmas story to them in a real creative way.
That was a big reason why I wanted to do the puts, is just that no matter where people are in their life, if they have a relationship with the Lord or they don't, they hunger for tradition at this time of year. And a lot of them don't want to go to a church. It's too much. And so I just felt like this is a good, comfortable way that they can just come be around, friends, and it's a casual environment.
Yeah.
And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes from everything.
Yeah. We always talk a lot about on this show just the blurring of the lines of the sacred and the secular, and you're always somebody, Claire, that really does that well. You're able to speak to people about the Lord in ways that are not weird or not so covered in tradition that people can't, respond to it. And I'd just be really interested, Miss Jean, from your perspective, a lot of times for people our age, tradition can be something that we don't relate to, and yet for the Moravians, it seems that tradition and community are so tied together that it's something that really draws you in. Talk a little bit about that, I think, from a generational perspective. Have you seen younger people that maybe have gone away from the church, but they still want to connect with the puts? They still want to connect with other traditions that are based really in community just because they love you and they love their family.
But I think Claire's a perfect example of that. Claire grew up here in the mountains. She did not attend a Moravian church, and yet through both sets of her grandparents, who are Moravian, she has come into this tradition of the things that Moravians do. And I'm so thankful that she has, and has brought her children into it also, because it is a wonderful teaching tool.
Yes.
The Moravians were always out in the forefront of education and visual. I thought of that when you were talking about your Santa Claus on the door, Visual arts is so important.
Yes.
And so the Moravians were in the forefront of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think for you too, I've seen you over the last couple of years really gravitate back
Yeah.
into this. It seems like a really important connection for you. Who is, if you don't know Claire, she's not what I would call a traditional person. You know, but at the same time, I looked on Facebook the other day, and there's Claire in Old Salem, you know, dressed in her Moravian
Period
garb,
costume.
period costume, and all this. And I'm like, it is really obvious that there's something inside your spirit that is connecting with God through the tradition of your family.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about that, God. That's huge.
Well, the Moravians it's beyond it's just such an awesome heritage. You know, it goes beyond the traditions. It goes beyond what the church is even today. And I'm just the older I get, the more curious I am about that, and want to embrace what that all is. And so that's what I'm seeking out and adding things through the years.
Well, that's awesome. We want to hear more about that and just your connection, your kids' connection, and all about that. So we're in the studio today. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Claire Brooks and Miss Jean Chitty talking about Moravian tradition and Christmas time here on In the Studio.
Asheville's Choice, 95.7.
Hi, I'm Matt Tommy from the Worship Studio. And if you're an artist, musician, craftsman, or just wanting to grow in your creativity, I'd like to invite you to be a part of the Unlocking the Heart of the Artist weekend experience coming up March 15th through 17th, 2013 in beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina. This weekend is specifically designed to help creative people just like you embrace their unique God-given design, overcome roadblocks to their creativity, pursue personal wholeness, and share the whole journey with artists from around the country. So for more information or to register online, please visit theworshipstudio.org/unlocking, and we'll see you in March for Unlocking the Heart of the Artist.
Programming at 95.7 The Choice is made possible with the generous support of business partners like Area 22 Guitars. Area 22 Guitars is Western North Carolina's only boutique guitar shop. Whether it's an American-made all-tube hand-wired amp like Matchless, Divided by 13, Carr, or Fargen, or a U.S.-built custom luthier electric guitar brand like Anderson, PWE, Zion, Rowan, or Gatto, Area 22 Guitars specializes in the unique needs of the discerning musician. They carry a full line of boutique effect pedals like Keeley, Exotic, Rockbox, Menatone, and Wobbler. And their acoustic guitars include Breedlove, Larrivee, Eastman, Bedell, and Crafter. Area 22 Guitars, not your average guitar shop. For more information, go to area22guitars.com or call them at 828-884-2222. That's 828-884-2222.
Back on In the Studio with Matt Tommy and Pattie Ann Hale, and you're listening to us on 95.7 The Choice live here in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also get us at 957thechoice.com or on facebook.com/The Worship Studio Inc. and download our simulcast here at any time. See us on video. We look great today. Some of us are in Christmas, beautiful red, Miss Jean, but and others of us are just in our polar fleece. But we're having a great time here today talking about Christmas traditions and some of the Moravian traditions that are here in North Carolina and around the world. So, Pattie, I know you're telling some funny stories about your kids and what you guys have done.
Well, all of this talk about, setting up your scenes reminded me of one of the most precious Christmases I can remember since having my children. Mostly my girls, but all of my children were young. I have 3 children, and mostly my girls were all into doing Barbie dolls and making clothes for Barbies, and that was their creative outlet. It was every day in their playroom making things for their Barbies and making up stories. I mean, they had little soap operas going on, it was incredible. So I decided that we would really integrate the Christmas story with their play. And so we were homeschooling at the time, so we made it a huge, big, long project. And, one of our Christmas traditions is always to read the Christmas story on Christmas Eve before we start opening gifts. And usually it's like everyone gather around and, oh, we got to listen to the story. And my mom's like, now everyone, this is very important, you know. And so she will read the story, or one of us, you know, one of the adults will read the story. But this year we decided to use a little Christmas book that we had, that I had used with my son Corey since he was a baby. And we used the Christmas story and the illustrations that was in the story. And my girls did costumes for their Barbie dolls.
Wow.
And so they played out the scene, you know, the Christmas story, the whole story, played all of that out. And it was just the most beautiful thing. And my parents were just so blessed, you know, because especially my mom.
Right.
I think it really made it real for her in
Sure.
a way that it wasn't just reading the story from
Right.
the Bible, but it was like her grandchildren were really getting this. They
Right.
really understood. And so I imagine that's what happens with you all as you're going through the scenes of the nativity of the puts. And so tell me how that works. Like, do you say a part of the story? Are you reading from the Bible, or do you just kind of tell generally in regular language about the story, and then you go through the scenes? Just tell us a little more of how that works. So.
It's King James Version. It's just straight out of Scripture, but it's pieced together through several different books of the Bible because of the way it is. In fact, because my daughter, who's 10, is reading it this year, I thought maybe we'll do New King James. And my mom said, "Oh, your grandparents will get you if you change it." So we left it.
There's nothing new about it.
Yeah, she was like, "No, no, no." And it is so poetic in King James. It's really beautiful, and Eliana's done a beautiful job catching on to the words and stuff. And now I forgot what you asked me
Just
exactly.
how does it work?
Oh,
You're-
and
you're
then how do
saying
you
the
read
scene?
it?
Yeah.
So she just reads it as if, the story, and
So she reads a section, and then that scene is
lights
lit up.
up. And then she just, as she moves on, the lighting just coincides with it the whole way through, and they come on and off. And then at the end, we light the tree that's above it, which is I have all Moravian ornaments on my tree and a Moravian star that lights it on top. So I light that up, and then we start singing carols and go through and turn every scene on slowly to where
Oh,
everyone
wow.
can see everything.
So what are Moravian ornaments? I mean, why are
They're
they
just-
different than?
They're Moravian scenes. They're Moravian candles. They're people dressed in period costumes that have been carved out, Moravian stars of different kinds. And I only have about 7 or 8, so I'm working on it through the years, collecting different ones.
That's still big in Old Salem, isn't it? Winston-Salem, the candle making, and don't they still do that?
Yeah, and that's the other thing. We got candles this year to hand out to all our guests that
Oh,
are
wow.
trimmed with the red paper.
Oh,
And so, and that, go ahead.
that is awesome. No, I'm just amazed at what you're saying. And so you guys were telling me on the break that your food even during the holidays is like there's Moravian cookies. You were saying you were talking about Sharon at Claire's daughter's school, at Eliana's school,
Right.
about the Moravian tradition. So tell us a little bit about that. Last year you said you went out to her school and was sharing, and they had cookies. And,
4th grade studies North Carolina history, and often the teachers up here will take the children to Old Salem. But last year, Eliana's teacher took them to Cherokee, I guess. I don't know why, but anyway, they didn't go to Old Salem. And Claire told the teacher about her grandmother. So
And you got an invitation.
here I go in my little Moravian outfit and told about my Christmas as a child in a Moravian village to 5 different 4th grades at Lester Elementary.
Wow.
And it was fun. And Claire's other grandmother in Winston-Salem, when she came up at Thanksgiving, she brought the Moravian ginger cookies, those very thin cookies, if you've ever seen Moravian cookies.
We were hoping there were going to be
Paper
some
thin.
today. But we're only I'm dreaming of a
You have to come see
gingerbread
the
cookie.
pudding.
That's right.
And so it was fun. And I told them about the candle. Traditionally on Christmas Eve, Moravians celebrate with a service called a love feast candle service. And a love feast is a worship service. It goes back to that period in Germany when the Moravians had first come there as refugees, and they were at odds with each other in this little village that they established there. And they were worshiping one day in a Lutheran church there, and the Holy Spirit was poured out on them. And they all were so happy and full of the Lord that they didn't want to go home. So the count, the German count, Zinzendorf, sent food down from his house to feed the people in the church.
Wow.
And so from that, we have a service called a love feast. And it's a traditional meal that we eat together in the sanctuary. It's not a fellowship meal. It's in the sanctuary. It's a mug of coffee and a very sweet yeast roll that we eat together in fellowship.
Wow.
And then at the end of that, on Christmas Eve, we have the candlelight service. The candles that Claire was speaking of, they're beeswax candles. Each one is handmade, hand-strung, and they're dressed or trimmed with red crepe paper. And of course, the symbolism of the candle is obvious. The Jesus, the light of the world. The red paper represents his blood. And then the aroma from the beeswax, the pure beeswax, is the beautiful aroma of the Lord also. Wow. So it's a very beautiful service. And most of the Moravian churches in Winston-Salem on Christmas Eve have 2 or 3 services to accommodate all the people. Because no matter if you're not a Moravian in Winston-Salem, you want to go to a Moravian Love Feast candle service.
I said, Lord, I might want to be a Moravian with the cinnamon rolls and the coffee.
What I thought was amazing that I just found out 2 years ago is that all the candles used for these services are still handmade by the women of the church. They do not order these. They do not send off for them. They hand pour them. They hand wrap them.
Wow.
It's thousands and thousands of
So
candles.
did you get yours that you're giving out? Did you get those from the women from the church?
I did, and every year for the last 2 years, my daughter and I have gone and participated in Candle Tea, which is where you can walk through the buildings and learn a little bit about these traditions. And that's where you saw the picture. We dressed in the period clothes. So we actually do the candles while we're there. That's the room we like to work in, the candle room, and we trim the candles. So we brought them home with us untrimmed. So we'll be getting ready for tonight's showing and trimming some candles.
Awesome. That's so beautiful, I think, because it stands in such stark contrast to this consumerism society that we live in nowadays of just buying a bunch of sometimes meaningless gifts for each other. And when you can really take it back to family and friends and our faith and being together, it's just a beautiful time. And I guess, for you that's been doing this tradition now so long, Miss Jean, is how has the tradition changed over the years from when you were a little girl to now seeing, grandkids and great-grandkids and that? How's it changed and evolved over the years?
Yeah, and please tell us the story that you told to the 4th graders about your Christmas when you were little, because I want to hear that.
Well, I grew up in a little Moravian village about 10 miles out of Winston-Salem called Bethania. It was actually the second place the Moravians went when they came south. But they always intended for Salem to be their main village, their main industrial town, for a better word. And so I grew up in this little village with relatives on either side of me, right at the foot of the church. I grew up directly across the street from the Moravian church. And so we did putses. Everybody did their puts under their Christmas tree. And groups of us would go caroling, and we would go to each other's homes and carol for them, and then be invited in to see their puts and for some hot chocolate or some cookies. And so that hasn't changed that much, really, because Claire's carrying on that tradition of inviting people in to see her puts.
Wow.
And of course, I told the children about they go to buy a Christmas tree. We didn't buy Christmas trees when I was a child. I went with my dad, and we went down close to the creek, and we cut a cedar tree. Cedars don't grow here in the mountains, but that was a traditional Christmas tree in the Piedmont, was a cedar.
Wow.
And that was fun, bringing the Christmas tree home, the live Christmas tree home, and setting it up and decorating it. So
that's great.
I love it.
And then I went into the candle, showing them how to decorate a candle and about the love feast, and had some pictures for them to color of the love feast and the candle and the star. We haven't talked about the star.
No.
You need a three-dimensional star to talk about a Moravian star. You can actually buy them here at Lowe's now. They're 26 points traditionally.
Wow.
Wow.
And they're three-dimensional, and you hang them on your porch through Advent to Epiphany.
Right.
And of course, they come in all sizes now, all shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
There can be some with 120 points.
My goodness.
So the church that we were members of in Winston-Salem before we moved up here had one that was 6 feet across. It had 120 points.
Wow.
And it would not go through the doors. So
Oh,
it had
wow.
to,
Had to keep it outside.
Had to be taken apart every
Wow.
year and put back together.
My
And
goodness.
first Sunday in Advent in Moravian churches, the Moravian star is hanging over the pulpit.
Wow.
And it hangs there until Epiphany, as I said.
How wonderful.
And that one
Yeah.
is paper.
Yeah, it's paper.
And
Originally,
of
they
course,
were paper.
Right, the ones you buy
And
now are plastic,
Yeah.
but they were hand folded.
So it's like a glow, like a lantern kind of thing, or is it more open, or?
No, it's
No, it's closed. It's
closed.
completely closed
Wow.
with these
Is it the
beautiful
ones with like
points.
the cone, almost like a cone for
Right.
the points, and
Right.
they're put together
Yes.
in like a V shape at the center?
Yes.
That's
Just-
beautiful.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
seen those, but I didn't know the history.
Yeah.
That it was a Moravian star.
Wow.
My
That's
daughter, our older daughter, is the children's director at First Presbyterian in Hendersonville.
Wow.
So she had an Advent fair, first Sunday in Advent, and she invited us to come. George my husband, was demonstrating making a Moravian star and telling the history of the star. It actually goes way back to a boys' school in Germany.
Wow. Well, why don't you tell us about that when we get back? We'd love to hear that whole history of the star. And when we get back for our last segment, talking about all these Moravian Christian traditions here on In the Studio.
You are listening to 95.7 The Choice, where we're not afraid to play a 6-minute song.
Hi, I'm Matt Tommy from the Worship Studio. And if you're an artist, musician, craftsman, or just wanting to grow in your creativity, I'd like to invite you to be a part of the Unlocking the Heart of the Artist weekend experience coming up March 15th through 17th, 2013 in beautiful Black Mountain, North Carolina. This weekend is specifically designed to help creative people just like you embrace their unique God-given design, overcome roadblocks to their creativity, pursue personal wholeness, and share the whole journey with artists from around the country. So for more information or to register online, please visit theworshipstudio.org/unlocking, and we'll see you in March for Unlocking the Heart of the Artist.
Programming at 95.7 The Choice is made possible with the generous support of business partners like Area 22 Guitars. Area 22 Guitars is Western North Carolina's only boutique guitar shop. Whether it's an American-made all-tube hand-wired amp like Matchless, Divided by 13, Carr, or Fargen, or a U.S.-built custom luthier electric guitar brand like Anderson, PWE, Zion, Rowan, or Gatto, Area 22 Guitars specializes in the unique needs of the discerning musician. They carry a full line of boutique effect pedals like Keeley, Exotic, Rockbox, Menatone, and Wampler. And their acoustic guitars include Breedlove, Larrivee, Eastman, Bedell, and Crafter. Area 22 Guitars, not your average guitar shop. For more information, go to area22guitars.com or call them at 828-884-2222. That's 828-884-2222.
Back today on In the Studio talking about beautiful Moravian Christmas traditions, and we're here in Asheville, but we're hearing all about wonderful stuff from the Piedmont area of North Carolina as well as all over the country. I'm sure now they're Moravians are like all of us. We've gone all over the place and taken these beautiful traditions. So before we ended our last segment, you were telling us about the Moravian, the star and all that. Keep telling us about that, because that was a wonderful story.
Well, the stars, you see them all over now. and they probably aren't even called Moravian stars, but they're three-dimensional stars with traditionally 26 points.
Right.
What you see that you can buy now made of plastic. You can buy them at Lowe's here.
Right.
And they're Advent stars.
Yeah.
They're hung during Advent. My daughter is, our oldest daughter, is a children's worker at First Presbyterian in Hendersonville. And she had an Advent fair on the first Sunday in Advent during the Sunday school hour. So she invited her father and me to come, and my husband, George, demonstrated the making of Moravian stars.
Wow.
And told the history of it, and he's better at that than I am. And I was dressed in my little Moravian outfit, and I trimmed candles and had candles and taught them how to trim.
Wow.
So the children could trim a candle and have a candle to take home with them.
That's wonderful.
So, yeah.
What is the origin of that star? How did it come to be used in Moravian tradition? And
Well, traditionally we say that it was a boys' school, and they were given a math project to create a three-dimensional figure
wow.
in somewhere in Germany, Niski or somewhere in Germany. And so the boys came up with the star
Wow.
that became the Moravian star that's used all over the world today, really.
Isn't that interesting? It's those little things you never, who would have thought, they never thought that what they were doing as a class project
Right.
would now be used all over the world, but I love that.
I am just so challenged, I think, more than anything, challenged to really know more about what my history is, what my family history is, and to do what you're doing, Claire, to really teach that to my children. We have little traditions that we do every year, like, and I'm very spontaneous, so so it's just like, oh, we'll do that this year.
Yeah.
But I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a guy on the street handing out these nails, and it's typically of the nails that you see at Easter time that they use in the drama, and so it was representative of Jesus on the cross, and it was around Christmas time, and it had a little tag with it, and he handed that to my husband, and it just had a little tag on there about hanging that nail at the center part of your tree, at the lowest part of the tree, and at the center, the center stem of the tree, and to remember that, how lowly Jesus came to us, and that he came to be our Savior.
Wow.
And so every year after we, I do a Christmas ornament for my kids every year, or Wayne and I do Christmas ornaments for our kids every year. And so Corey will get me for this because he's almost 19, but the other night he was getting all of his Christmas ornaments out and hanging them on the tree, and he had this little goofy smile that was like, he kind of turned away from us when we handed him one. It was his first Christmas ornament from when he was a baby, and I said, I was just like, oh, there's your first one, and he had this little goofy smile, and he turned away, and Wayne and I were just like, oh my gosh, it's so sweet. And he's just putting it on the tree. But it's things like that, as my children start to move out of my house, I don't know if I'll let them take those ornaments or not.
Not for a while.
But I think, how special it is for them that every year, for 19 years, he will have 19 ornaments that he can take home with him to his home. It becomes his own.
Absolutely.
And so little things like that. And so after we do all of the ornaments, we hang that nail on the tree. We pray, we think about Jesus, we talk about that, and we hang that nail, at the very center of the tree. And it visually is very much, and positionally even, just getting low to the bottom of that tree. And, the trees are huge. Yeah. You really have to get up underneath that tree, that tree that symbolizes everlasting life. And you're hanging that nail there, so it reminds you, that this is the reason for the season. Right. And so that's one of my favorite things that we do every year. There's all the fun stuff. The Santa Claus on the door and the gingerbread houses and the, the Christmas cookies. But it's meaningful things like you guys are carrying through that tell the gospel. That's just amazing.
I think for people as we are, as creatives who love to live by the flow of the Spirit and spontaneity and those sort of things, we can often jettison tradition. We can often, push aside those things which are familiar to us. But when you can tie tradition to the move of the Spirit, to community, to family, that's when those things really take on the special meaning, and they can last. I mean, you think, when you're gone, when I'm gone, when all of us are gone and our kids are now the ones leading our families, it is the traditions that we give them now that will be able to say, I remember when Grandpa, and I remember when Grandma used to go over and do so and so, and it's that connection that connects you for your family all the way back to Count Zinzendorf and before.
Yeah.
You know, it's the love feast and the making the ornaments and the candles and those things that really, really make it special. So what does Koa think about all this? He's 7, and I mean, is he getting the connection? Is it just fun for him right now, or is he really?
I think it's just fun for him right now, but we get to tell him, you know, that his mom did it when she was a kid, and so he says he does the lights, but as I said, there's 2 switchboards, so he is not doing the lights right now.
He fancies himself as
He
the Puts
sits
lighting
with
director,
me.
right?
Yeah, he's the director. That's
That's right.
right. And Eliana, she loves stuff like this. She loves traditional things. She loves seeing a thread through our whole family that's connected together. When she's reading the Christmas story and the very last lines, which is "Unto us a child is given, unto us a Savior is born," she tears up every time. It's the sweetest thing. Like she feels it. You know, she's. So
and did she do something the other day at Old Salem? Was she over there doing a reading or a song or something?
Oh, she was. So she actually, we were in the candle room.
Yeah.
But she went out up into the chapel where they sing hymns and Christmas carols. And there's a very traditional Moravian hymn called Morning Star. And it hasn't left the Moravian church much. Many of the songs transcend different denominations, but Morning Star hasn't really. And it's sung in 2 parts, and you have a soloist, and then the congregation answers them.
Wow.
And so that was really special. She was invited to be the soloist during her time up there. She did it about 13 times. Bless her heart, her little throat was hurting when she left. But that's neat because her grandfather had sung it when he was a child. He was the soloist several times, and it's recorded doing it. So
Wow.
that's neat.
Well, this has been such a special time with you guys today. It really, I hope for all of our listeners, just encourages them to reconnect with the traditions that may be in their family, wherever they may be from around the world, even here in the mountains or down in the South or out in the Northwest. You never know where folks are, but there's such rich traditions that we all have, especially from different Christian communities that we can all bring back in this time of the year. So wherever you are, I hope you're experiencing a wonderful, wonderful Christmas season right now. If you're creative and wondering, hey, you know, I want to be more creative. I'm in the kingdom. I don't know what God wants for me. We encourage you, go to our website, theworshipstudio.org. You can find out a lot of different resources, just like this one, that'll challenge you, encourage you to be all that God's called you to be as a creative in the kingdom. And so from Pattie and myself, we want to wish you a very, very Merry Christmas.
Yes,
and
Merry Christmas.
and catch us next time here on In the Studio. Bye-bye now.